chapel. Nancy was back there running her mouth, and I couldn't get up here. That's why I'm late. All right. Let's open in prayer and we'll get started. Father, tonight, thank you for your loving kindness, and we ask that you just be with us as we look at your word and help us to not only learn and educate ourselves about things to come, but help us to apply it to our lives in such a way that we live every day as if it's our last. Thank you for preparing us as your children, Father, each and every day. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right, guys. Chapter 18. If you have your Bibles, we see the end in sight. If you're looking ahead and trying to cheat a little bit as far as where we're at, Sunday I will probably preach out of chapter 21. Then, well, it won't be Sunday night because we're going to Rainbow. Remember Rainbow next Sunday night. And I'll be honest, we didn't have such a great turnout last time we went over there with them. So let's go over and support. And, you know, it's important that churches come together. And so let's be supportive of that. But next Wednesday night, I should finish it up with chapter 20. I don't know if I would go through all of chapter 21 Sunday morning or not. But if not, I'll tie it in with chapter 20. And then starting the week from this Sunday night, Worley's going to be preaching for 4 weeks. And he's been working on a series. And so we'll let him have at it. And I'm excited. I know what it's about. And I think it's very vital. And as we begin tonight in chapter 18, I see my assistant pastor's not here, Nancy Wheels. Nancy came up to me, I guess it was last Wednesday night. You know, make sure if you were reminded, and I know what it is. You get so caught up in telling what's happening and what's going on. And it kind of scares us a little bit, especially what some of the stuff we dealt with the Bible judgments. The church is gone. We're an observer, basically, during this time. And I'm thankful for that. And I think it was me and Worley was talking one day, and I told him, I don't know, I think it may have been Worley. It was somebody. Or maybe just make-believe friend. But I said, I hope, and I know there's all kinds of interpretations, and I think we all been around church long enough and with prophecy that we have our opinions and our thoughts, but we could still be wrong. I mean, we could still miss it somehow or miss some of the things. I said, I hope that I'm not wrong on the rapture. I said, because that is our blessed hope. You know, that is our hope of missing some terrible things. And, you know, it's... I've heard people say they don't believe in God and all this stuff, and matter of fact, they're making some movies for Sunday already. And I just thought, but what if we're right? I mean, from a spiritual standpoint, we know we are, as far as the big picture. And, you know, it's sad. There'll be a lot of folks going to miss out. All right, so that was a commercial for Miss Nancy. Remember, the church is gone. Chapter 17 actually dealt with the mystery of Babylon. It's the religious aspect of what's to come. And just to paint a picture in your mind, whenever the church is raptured and after that takes place, remember the Antichrist is coming on the scene. And they set up basically a one-world religion. You know, just everybody believes in everything. And I saw something just a week ago or 2 weeks ago that just really, I thought, there's no way that these two religions would ever settle and agree on anything. And if it didn't happen, the Pope and one of the Muslim leaders actually sat down and signed some agreements. It's like two distinct different views. And I understand we all need to kind of get along and you know, out of brotherly love, but man, there's some, anyway. When the rapture takes place, there will be a one world religion that will come on the scene. After about halfway through, we know the Antichrist is killed and raises from the dead, and that's when it's basically Satan incarnate. I mean, the devil really consumes this guy. And they move from a one world religious system to worshiping the Antichrist. Remember, they'll have the false or the fake god and build up statue, and we dealt with all that, I don't know, maybe a month ago. And so we dealt with the fall last week of that religious system that he sets up. But this chapter deals with the destruction of a worldwide commercial empire that's set up. You know, some wonder is, when they talk about Babylon here, and this is one of those things that basically it's down to two, or there's maybe several different opinions, but a lot of them narrow it down to two. But is this talking about an actual city, or is this talking about a system that's in place? My personal opinion I think it's talking about an actual city, but it is a worldwide system that's in place because the Antichrist is in charge of it. And it's operating across the world. But when we see Scripture here, I believe it's talking about a city. I think Antichrist will set up kind of like a capital city. Now, that's where it gets dicey, because we know he's got to have a base of operation. Now remember, he's human. Antichrist is human, even though at this time he's, you know, basically just the devil in the flesh. But there has to be a base of operation. It ain't like he's just traveling around in a van. So there has to be a base of operation. And this is where there's several thoughts, but I'll narrow it down to two. One of them, it's literally Babylon that will be rebuilt. Or when John referred to the 7 hills or the 7 mountains several chapters ago, that's actually talking about Rome. And a lot of people may believe, or a lot of people believe, that the Antichrist does come out of that area. And that would be why he would set it up there. And I don't have a problem with him setting it up there or coming out of that area. I'll just be honest, I don't know. I don't know if it's actually going to be in the Rome area or if it's going to be a regular, you know, just Babylon. Pull out Babylon, there it is on the map over around Iraq. But here it's speaking to, though, I believe, to a specific city and not just something in general, because the contextual progress of, and that's one thing, especially in studying the Bible with anything, you got to read in the context and see how it flows. We can pick any verse out and make it mean anything we want it to say, just about. I mean, we can make anything say anything. That's why you've got to take it in context, and in the context of the writing, and from the perspective, too, of society at that time, because John will use some of the illustrations as he writes, or some of the wordage from what he knows. So, but from the language, it seems to be, and it's just me, and you can study it and figure out what you want, you know, believe, but I think it's talking about a literal city. Is it Rome or is it Babylon? I've read both ways. If I have to pick off the cuff, and this sounds crazy, but I'd go with Babylon first, and then Rome. But that's just me. But anything with prophecy, let's not miss the big picture. Okay, verse 1. says, and after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. Now, here we see the phrase, and there came. This is kind of a after these things from the previous chapter. Now, you know, we have the breakup as far as chapters and verses. John didn't have that. You know, it's coming to him. So here we are, and we're getting that, and it's shifted to like another chapter, if you will, of the vision. A different, not a different picture, but maybe a different subject matter. And when it says another angel came down from heaven, there's a couple of things about this angel. It says in verse 1 that had great power. This means authority. And he says he came down from heaven. I'm thinking the angel comes down to earth, okay, where it's visual. And it talks about he's leaving the presence of God to act on God's behalf. And then it says earth was lightened with his glory. And to me, this is the brilliant glory display for all to see. Personally, I think that when this angel comes down, I think everybody's going to see it. But that's just me. You say, well, Mike, how can everybody see it if it's way over there? Well, God's a big God, and there's been a lot of things happen up to this point that's unreal. So remember, this is coming a warning. This is kind of the end of it. And then he goes on to say some things in verse 2. Babylon the Great is fallen. Well, you know, I just think because it is in a one-world system, and all the economy, not only religion now, they're worshiping the Antichrist, and that's going down. But we do know that the economy, man, people are driven by money, aren't they? People are driven by money. Crazy. Crazy. I knew some people when I worked with hospice, they had a hard time preparing for death because they was worried about their money. I'm going, who in the world? It's crazy, isn't it? One of the funny stories is, I was telling somebody this the other day, and they're a bike rider. And I said, one of the neatest families that I had in hospice, you know, I saw some of the worst of the worst. And I'll be honest, some of the things as far as the way family acts. I've seen cuss outs, fights, cops called, everything. I've ran families off, told them I was calling the cops. They didn't shut up and get out. I mean, I'm not there for the family, I was there for the patient. And that was my number one priority. But there was one family, they were a hoot. And the daddy had died. And Mama, it was Mama's turn now. she was dying, and she was getting close. I mean, she was there within the months. And they had some stuff, material-wise. Not a lot, but they had stuff. And all the kids are gathered around. They're not arguing, and not that there's really arguing, they're not arguing over the house, the cars, the money, or the CDs, or anything. You know what was the funny thing I was arguing about? All the Harley-Davidson shirts that Mom and Daddy had. Because they were bike riders, and they bought shirts everywhere they went. And I bet they had, well, and you divide it or multiply it by 2 because they both had one, they probably had 300 shirts total. I mean, it was unreal. A lot of the shirts, they were hung up and had the little plastic thing on them, you know. And that meant more to the kids than the money did. But money usually drives people, though, for the wrong reason. And here's what was driving the force of that economic coming together. Look in verse 2. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. I believe the headquarters, no matter where we think it may be, wherever the Antichrist's headquarters is, it is going to be demonic activity around that headquarters like nobody's ever seen. Now, there's going to be demonic activity everywhere. But that's going to be like, to me, I think when it says this, that's going to be kind of the hub. Because remember, who's indwelling the Antichrist now? Who is it? Satan. So all these other demons, They know. It's just like they just want to suck them in, like a vortex. And yeah, they're out and about everywhere else across the world, but it's this city is unreal. And here when it just says Babylon, that's why I say I just stick with Babylon as far as where it's going to be. And it uses the phrase, in a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Now that's kind of odd phrasing. We don't usually use a lot of words like that. But that's a reference to Isaiah 34. It's a picture, Isaiah pictured when this happened. Have you ever seen just vultures hanging around, flying around in circles because something's dead down here? And they're going to eat? A picture in your mind, the demons hover. But not that they're going to physically eat, but man, they're just picking people, attacking, getting them over to their way of thinking, and devastating. And verse 3 says, for all nations, and this is why I say it's not just at the headquarters. Here it says, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. The system is so prosperous, but it's morally bankrupt, really. And basically the leaders of the world, and when it talks about here the kings, I believe this is talking about the 10 kings. Remember, the Antichrist will have leadership involved, his top tier leadership. And then there's going to be other leaders. It's not like those leaders can do it all. They'll have a leadership board somehow, and it will funnel down. But this is how everybody came up. How do you get everybody? And I'm sure there's always going to be little intricacies of people who just fight against anything. But how do you get the majority of the people of the world to come together? Well, it says, hang on, I just about went and started talking about chapter 17 again. The system's prosperous. And basically the leaders will give all they have in order to get all they can. And how can people do that? It goes back to the love of money. Now, is money the problem? No. It's that love of money that'll get you. How many people do you know, and I'm not poking fun, but I've been down here at the gas stations, and I've heard people go in, and I hate going and standing in line for 30 minutes while people buy lottery tickets. I just act, the older I get, the more I act. I think they ought to just have their own register for lottery tickets, but that's just me. But the sad thing is, I was standing behind a guy not long ago, and he starts talking about, well, I'm going to play it again. I bet he spent $60, $80. I don't know. I've never played. I don't know how you do all that. But he said, well, I was hoping to win enough to make my truck payment. And he's telling his girlfriend that he's like 3 months behind. And I'm thinking, and yeah, you're using your money to play the lottery. That just don't make no sense. But yet, we see society doing that more and more and more. We may play games with our money. It may not be the lottery. But, buddy, we'll give everything to get more. More. To me, it goes back to that sinful nature. Just want. You know, it's kind of like, and some of you men understand, you know, Jamie loves hunting and fishing and duck hunting and deer hunting and turkey hunting and motorcycles, and you always got to have that next thing to go on it. You know, the better decoy, yeah, the better scope, the better clothing. And I say, honey, listen, calm down. Now, if you believe that, we need to talk. But you know what I'm saying? It's in our nature. It's like we can't be satisfied. Imagine that to the 100th millionth degree. That's what's going to be taking place here on earth. And the demonic power behind it is going to be so suppressing and enticing that they'll just give. They'll give just to be a part of this system, because the Antichrist has promised them, I'm sure, all kinds of kickbacks. Now, we know politicians aren't greedy, or that they lie. Remember, the system's prosperous, but morally bankrupt. Verse 4, and I heard another voice from heaven say, come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. Now, to me, we see another angel that shows up, and I believe this is a different angel than in verse 1. But the other angel basically says, get out of Dodge. Okay? Make that interpretation. Get out of Dodge. You don't want to be around when it gets really hard, because something's coming that you just don't realize. Get out of Dodge. And why? And I don't know why it would be like that, or I couldn't imagine why you would still try to live in an area or a city that was so demonic. And you remember, if you've not taken the mark and you're a Christ follower, well, you're living under the shadows, trying to, just get enough substance to survive. And that's probably why they're around town. But yet, the angel says, get out. Get out. Because something's getting ready to happen, and y'all better run. Now, everybody else listening, listen up. Get out of this system. You better watch out, because it's going to tear you to pieces. And it's kind of like Lot. Remember when Lot was warned? What did God basically tell Lot? Get out and don't look back. They say, well, make sure your finances are in order. Make sure that you move on your CDs from one bank to the next bank. Here, when they say get out, I believe it's time to get out. We don't form a committee. We don't ask everybody's interpretation of it. We get out. And there's a reason for that. Verse 5. For her sins have reached unto the heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. When you look at the phrase, the sins have reached unto heaven, it's talking about the sin. It has gotten so bad, it's like it's piled up all the way to God. If you can kind of imagine that in your mind. It's like it has gotten so wicked that it just continues to pile up and pile up. Kind of like it's a new Tower of Babel. Remember, we talked about the Tower of Babel and how they infiltrated false religions, and how God just dispersed them in different areas and, different languages, so they couldn't understand each other. And this seems to be far worse than what the Tower of Babel was. Verse 6 says this, reward her even as she rewarded you, double unto her double according to her works, and the cup which she hath filled, to fill to her double. The reward her phrase means to pay a debt, to give back what is due. In other words, this system that's set up for all its practices, no matter if everybody's in love with it, it's going to receive double basically what they put in. Imagine if, let's go back to money. If you invest your money, whether it's in a retirement program or your own, or whatever, how you do that through your workplace, or you do it on your own. If you invest your money and over a year's time it doubles, is that a good rate of increase? Oh, yeah. How many of us would take it? We would. Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you wouldn't, you just got more money than what you know what to do with. Okay? So imagine the sinfulness that has been invested. The judgment is not just going to cover it on the same level. It's going to be double from God's perspective. The judgment that comes. It's kind of like the sinfulness is here, but they're going to get double the judgment. because how everything's affected. Verse 7 says this, how much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her, for she hath in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Basically, the anti-system glorifies itself, and really ultimately to glorify him, the devil. But it's almost like it's above judgment and sorrow, the way the verse reads. They think they're above everything. Oh, that's kind of like the devil, isn't it, already? And there's three specific things mentioned in this verse. Hath glorified herself, very prideful. Everything is about their system, the Antichrist. Live deliciously, pursuit of self-gratification. I think, and it's just McNutt interpretation, that it's going to be a society, more so at the headquarters and even around the world, but especially at the headquarters where the Antichrist sits up. It's going to be anything and everything goes. Whatever their little natural desires want to be, it's going to go. And it's going to be fine in public opinion. I think our senior doves here would tell us that our country's changed a lot over the last 50 years for what we say is right and what we say is wrong. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse, I'm afraid. But when these days happen, it's going to be like there's not going to be any checks and balances. It's everybody for themselves, as long as it falls under the Antichrist way of doing it. And remember, he don't have everybody's best interest in mind. You can live, you can do whatever you want, basically, I think. And this is just mine. But they'll be living like a heathen nation. And nothing that I think we've seen so far in this world. Now, we can kind of say, well, this particular city or that particular city, but there's still checks and balances. But anyway, it says, I sit a queen. It's talking about, to me, that this system of economy that's run by the Antichrist is self-sufficient, and they think their power is power. They think that's all they need. Verse 18, or verse 8 says this, therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judged her. It's kind of like the picture in Daniel chapter 5 with the writing on the king's wall. Here, to me, it says judgment is going to be swift, and it's going to be devastating. Verse 9 says, and the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning. This group, I believe, includes the 10 kings that help rule under the Antichrist, along with the other leadership and position. Everything that their whole life now is built on serving this system of economy. Everything. They've given their resources, their area of influence as resources, put money in it, they live lavishly, all this stuff, and then boom, it's going to be destroyed. Imagine what life will be like during that time. Verse 9. Or verse 10, excuse me. Standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. That great city, the world thinks it's a safe place, a strong place, a powerful place. I just believe that there's not going to be, when all the plagues and the judgments come, and I think Babylon, is going to be kind of still halfway, pretty much okay. I mean, the people's going to be affected. But here we see it's going to crash. Not just the system itself as far as economics is, but the city is going to be gone. Verses 12 and 13 says, "And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore." Verse 11 talks about the economy crashing. World leaders are going to be crying. The merchandise in verse 12 of gold and silver and precious stones, of pearls and fine linen, and purple and silk and scarlet and all fine wood, and all manner of vessels of ivory, and all the manner of vessels of most precious wood, and of brass and iron and marble. Basically, what this is talking about in verse 13, and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. Everything they know is going to be destroyed. When the economy collapses, how much is your money worth? It even goes to say not only the very nice things, but common items, I believe, won't be able to be purchased or possessed when it started into ointments and oil and flour and wheat. Common things you won't be able to get. When it says the phrase slaves and souls of men, I think, and this is just mine, I think there it's talking about slavery, physical slavery. I think there's going to be a lot of that going on too. Remember, there's no checks and balances in the world at this time. The Antichrist is really running strong. That's just me. Verse 14. "And the fruits of thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly." I'm glad we don't use those words to describe certain things anymore. Dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. In other words, all the luxury, all the things of luxury, you won't be able to get them anymore. Remember, the Antichrist is controlling everything here. You're not going to be able to get those things. Verse 15, "The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls." They're going to weep and mourn. Not over the destruction of lives that's lost. Think about that. If we see, y'all remember when the terrorist attacks happened? It's like America was just consumed around the world. And the devastation of the planes going down or planes hitting the towers. But the lives that were lost. Remember the video, the video feeds of people jumping out of those high-rise buildings to commit suicide because they didn't want to be burned alive. They were dead either way. The lives that were lost, I think, for humanity here and across the world at the time, for the most part, it's like, oh my gosh, those people's lives. Buildings you can build back, but the lives. When this city falls, they can care less about the lives that were lost because it's all about the money that they lost. Their greed will not be fed anymore, but they'll cry over the loss of money. Verse 17 says, "For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster and all the company and the ships and sailors, and as many as trade by the sea, stood far off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like it to this great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, the great city, wherein we were made rich, all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness, for in 1 hour she is made desolate." I believe Babylon will be an important distribution center, as it was said earlier. Nothing's going to be transported. Here's a picture of people crying. And I can understand it from the degree of you lose your job. But they just watch and amazed as the city burns. Now the angle of perception moves. It's kind of like we have a picture here, but the perception of the camera changes in verse 20. It says, "Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her." This is heaven's perspective. Will be different as compared to the Antichrist and his followers. Basically, the angel announces the waiting is over. Remember the prayers of the martyrs in chapter 6? That's several weeks ago. But the prayers of the martyrs come up. God, please intervene. God, please allow your justice, your righteousness, your holiness. And I believe the prayers were answered. And I believe the rejoicing is not over the damnation or the death of people, but I believe it's over the righteousness of God is justified. That a system that is in place is going to be fallen and it's going to continue to fall. And it's more than just a city or a hub or a distribution center. It is the Antichrist himself and the influence of evil. Verse 21 says this, "And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with the violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all." Here we see another angel appears, a mighty angel, a strong angel, a very angel. A stone like a millstone. A millstone was a huge round stone used to grind grain. They were usually 4 to 5 feet in diameter and about a foot thick. As the stone disappears into the sea, the city's destruction will be complete. I mean, it's just kind of like that. It's just amazing. Verse 42, "And the voice of harpers and musicians and pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee, and no craftsman or whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee, and the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee." How we say that in today's language? No more parties. Not going to be working. Day-to-day living as you know it is over. You're not going to be able to go out and do whatever you want, however you please, whenever you want. Verse 23, "And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee, for the merchants were the great men of the earth, for by the sorceries were all nations deceived." Now here a lot of times when they start talking about the bride and the bridegroom, some people kind of go toward Jesus and the church. That's not what that's talking about here. It's a different reference, I believe. I think it's talking about what's one of the most joyous occasions for a family? When your children get married. It's a joyful time. Should be. Scary time, but joyful. Celebration. I think this is painting a picture that there's not going to be any celebrating. There's not going to be any of that. When it says the light of the candle, it talks about habitation, a home. Whenever your kids go out, and let's imagine, you know, when your kids were at a certain age, you felt comfortable leaving them alone for about an hour or two, even though you were close. You know, you might go to the store, go do something, because they've reached a certain age. And then you drive back home and every light in the house is on, because they're not scared. You know, every light in the house on, every floodlight the whole place is lit up. Well, as they got older, it's, you know, when your kids go out, they're, you know, going out on a date, they're going to a ball game, they're out going out with friends. You know, as a parent, you know, you can't stay up all hours of the night maybe like you used to, or you sleep with one eye open. Do you leave all the lights turned off? Well, of course not. You leave the light on. You know, that's a safe place. That is a place where they can come. Here when it says the light of the candle is gone out, it's like there appears to be such a great depression and the lack of life to go on that people will not even want to be a part of any of this anymore. But it also says in verse 23, deceived by sorceries. Who's behind that? The Antichrist. Who's behind the magic, the occult, all the things that takes place? Satan incarnate in the Antichrist. Verse 24, and in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. This economic system, the religious system that was set up by the Antichrist, everything about them goes against God. Everything. There's going to be a lot of people that's going to die because of their choice not to accept his leadership. They will choose not to accept the mark of the beast. Remember, it talks about the forehead or the hand. They're not going to do it. If they're caught, and they will be hunted down, I believe. I mean, hunted. Remember, the demonic activity going on is so vast and so strong. They can't stand anything that's of God. And whenever they do not take that mark, we talked about it before, what's going to happen? They go back to cutting people's heads off. And here we see that this whole system is the cause of so many deaths. And it's sad. There's going to be a lot of people die this day. There'll be a lot of people that's going to die that deserve basically the death and not Christ. All right. Just a reminder. 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. 5 study guides in the back. Okay? You can pick those up and just kind of work through some of them. You may have to go back and really maybe read. And I actually, as I typed them out and all that stuff, I was kind of reading to see how I'd done on the test. Actually done good. So, but I'm reading it every day. So, but that'll help you just kind of keep things in perspective. All right, as we close, we'll just close in prayer where we're at. I think the flu bug is starting to hit a little bit more again, so just kind of do that a little bit. Put it this way. Any prayer requests tonight?